Hi, this is Tucker Goodrich. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Brian Kerley, and Matt Quinn, who, against all expectations, keeps coming back for these things. Thank you, Matt, so much. We really do appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Quinn. I am a father of two young babies on a mission to figure out what is my healthy path in life. And I'm an established technologist as well. So, somewhere between tinkering with technology, trying to work out how stuff works, and tinkering with my nutrition, trying to find out how stuff works, I've ended up here to try and understand more about linoleic acid, polyunsaturated fats, and seed oils.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Brian, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Hey, I'm Dr. Brian Kerley. I'm a doctor with a meme account, seed oil disrespecter, having fun on the internet and educating about nutrition. My hot take is that seed oils being bad is about 80, it's the 80-20 of modern nutrition. There you
Makes
go.
sense. I like that. So what we've been doing in this series is talking about one or two studies, trying to keep it short and helping to understand some of the different aspects in which seed oils affects human health. And at Brian's suggestion, in this episode, we are going to talk a little bit about cancer. Um, Everybody's least favorite piece of information is cancer diagnosis. Unfortunately, it's the second most common cause of death, I believe, in the United States after heart disease. So it's certainly something that all of us have experienced in one way or another. What we're talking about today is one of our other repeat guests is a chemical called HNE, which is produced from the primary fat in seed oils, linoleic acid, and the human P53 gene. And I thought that this was a really good introduction to the topic of seed oils and cancer because it's kind of a crucial paper establishing the relationship. What did you guys think?
It was about 90% very nerdy lab information and 10% memeable, actionable. It's a great introduction for people to be able to see, why does we talk about, omega-6 and cancer. There's plenty of information out there on human beings and processed food and cancer. And this is a mechanistic link that shows you how we can see where the plausible threads are coming through.
It was heavy. I mean, it's very, very nerdy. I would say when I was reading this earlier today, I dropped by myself in my office, doors closed, no one could hear me. I dropped an extremely loud F-bomb when I read one of the things in here, and it like clicked what I was looking at, which I kind of then noticed to myself that was kind of funny. But I read the book about Otto Warburg's life. I can't remember the name of it, and I read half, and then I realized I didn't know what I was doing. Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, the textbook by Thomas
Seyfried.
Yeah.
Yes, who I interviewed once.
It's like
Very
a
interesting guy.
400 page textbook. And I got halfway through it and was like, I'm just shoving more words in my head that I don't understand. Like I should stop.
You know what? If you keep doing that long enough, they start to make sense. That's
Yeah,
basically
exactly
all I've
right.
been doing.
It definitely felt like looking through the paper. I was like, this is just like that. Reading all these little name acronym things that mean nothing to me. But I have sat down at a dinner table. I always call back on certain members of my family. I've sat down at a dinner table with a medical professional in my family and had them explain to everybody at the table, supposedly, that cancer is 100% genetic and there's all this evidence and this is how this works. And I've just sat there being like, I'm pretty sure that's not right. Like, I think I know that that's not right, but I can't articulate that that isn't the whole picture. But I know somewhere in there that, like, yeah, the metabolites of linoleic acid have a role here. So I thought this was like a good keystone, or not a keystone, but like a good jigsaw piece, that puzzle.
I think it is a keystone. I think that's the right word.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is P53 and why do we care? P53 is a gene that we all have that is known as the tumor suppressor gene, right? And obviously, having a tumor suppressor gene is a good thing. It is not surprisingly the most commonly mutated gene in human cancers. And we can get into genetic mutation in cancer to some extent, but this is kind of one of the hallmark genes in human cancers, right? Because if it's working correctly, it's supposed to be preventing your body from getting tumors. Um, what is 4-HNE? As I mentioned before, it's a common metabolite of linoleic acid. It's produced in foods when they're cooked. For instance, French fries typically contain a fair dose of 4-HNE, and it can be produced in your body, specifically in your mitochondria, from which place it can then propagate through the rest of your cell, causing all sorts of mayhem. Do you guys have any questions about those two aspects? I think we should get that out of the way because you can't really understand the rest of this without um, hitting on those points.
I would like to throw out there that just, I think one paper that talks about such a ubiquitous, the potential for such a common ingredient should get a lot of attention. Just one of these papers probably should get a lot of attention. And
Yeah.
it doesn't. And we've got countless of papers. We have countless papers. And so the camp, this show, us folks here, that says maybe we should minimize this. That's one claim, right? And then the camp that says, no big deal.
There's no human evidence.
That's the bold claim. The bold claim is that, well, because what are we talking about here? Okay, we've got mechanism, right? And then what's the next logical step? Okay, let's talk about quantity, concentration, intake, how much of this is in our bodies. And so the pro-cetal group, I guess you'd say, or this is not a big deal, says, there's some X factors out there somewhere that have way more control in this than the quantity. I don't know. I just feel like they have the bold claim.
Right. So
I just wanted to say that. I wanted to get that out from the very beginning, a very relatable sentiment.
Yeah, and we should point out, the papers up on the screen so people can read. They're specifically talking here about cancer of the liver. Cancer of the liver disease in general has been going up in the United States. The general progression is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which takes you, also known as steatosis, just means fat in the liver, takes you to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, which is called NASH. And then from there, you can progress to liver cancer, right? The primary cause of liver failure in the United States used to be hepatitis, what is it, C? But they've recently, God bless them, come up with a cure for hepatitis C. Now we're looking at a case where this pathway of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease progressing to liver cancer is the primary cause of liver failure and the need for liver replacements in the United States, right? We know that the easiest way to induce non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is to inject people with soybean oil. That works very reliably. It's a common medical treatment, and it often leads directly to liver failure and to liver cancer. So essentially what this paper is doing is helping us understand how you can go to the step from fatty fibrotic liver, which is what NASH is, to liver cancer, right? And what they're showing here is that HNE, which is produced from the seed oils, like in soybean oil, when it becomes oxidized, is preferentially, and I really like that, able to cause the mutation that is the mutation that we see in liver cancer, right? So this food item causes the damage that we see in liver cancer. And I think that's just it's an amazing thing to realize that they're aware of this pathway and that they've got documentation on exactly how it works down to the molecular level. And we won't get into all of that stuff because, as you guys noticed, some of this stuff is pretty darn detailed. And it's not really necessary for us to go through. People can look at it if they want to.
Yeah, that's a master's degree, basically, of lab work right there.
Yeah, exactly. Matt, any questions? You're sliding off the bottom of the screen over
there. Sorry, I've got my paper on this side of the screen, so I'm like looking closer at it. I think in the line, that first page of the line, it was calling out. So you're mentioning the liver, and this is like, I'm going to get this terminology wrong because it's genes, and I don't know genes, but it's saying, my understanding of how this all works is you have external factors that cause gene mutations that are cancers or lead to cancers, as opposed to there being gene mutations in your genes that cause cancers for the most part. And this is saying at this site Codon 249, it's that is the gene, that is the place where a mutation happens that is most connected with liver and lung cancer. So we're talking about liver, but also lung. I think lung is mentioned here.
Right. And there are a variety of different spots in this gene where mutations can happen, and they see in different types of cancers. There are different places where you see different mutations.
Then, yeah, I guess there's also a meta call out here again, which is like with every paper we look at, right? So this is looking at 4-HNE. For anybody that hasn't seen the other episodes, the primary source of 4-HNE in a human body in today's America is the oxidized byproduct of linoleic acid, which you find in seed oils.
In chicken and pork.
And in chicken and pork, which is another discussion people usually aren't ready for. But like, it's not calling out seed oils, it's not calling out linoleic acid. It's specifically saying, okay, you eat this stuff, then it leads to this, then it turns into this, then what? And we're saying this is then what? Okay, you take the 4-HNE and it causes genetic mutations that cause liver cancer.
Right. And 4-HNE, Brian and I kind of have a running joke going here. 4-HNE is what's known as an aldehyde. And they say here on the upper left-hand side of the screen, aldehydes are also generated during autooxidation of fats and oils, particularly those rich in polyunsaturated fatty acids. So they don't say seed oils. They don't say linoleic acid, I don't think, anywhere in this paper, unless it's in one of the footnotes.
I think they do towards the beginning, because I was surprised to see.
Do they?
Actually, the L word. Yeah, I think they actually said linoleic.
Oh my, I missed it. Yes, they do.
Yeah, we can make this a game every time we do an episode.
Well, it's become a game. You're right, and it's in the first sentence. Shame on me.
Yeah. I was happy to see that. But for those listening, there's lots of papers out there that don't even mention linoleic acid, even if they're talking about, the dangers of of the compound that they're studying or analyzing.
Right. So we're not going to go through a lot of this because it's just super detailed. They go through when they talk about which part of the gene is predisposed to be. I mean, there's something called an adduct where basically the 4-HNE molecule binds to one of the amino acids in the gene, and that's what causes the gene to stop functioning correctly. 4-HNE is highly reactive with other molecules, especially with lipids, proteins, and DNA, sadly enough. So they go through the mechanics of exactly why it likes this spot in the gene, and all that is kind of neat. But what I think is really fascinating is that we know a couple of things about cancer, right? Cancers typically have genetic mutations. It's not always the case, but it's overwhelmingly the case, right? So I would say Dr. Seyfried isn't entirely correct. We also know that cancers can have a huge environmental factor, right? Smoking's the obvious example of that. We know that people who move from the who immigrate to the United States often see a big change in their cancer incidence. Classically, one of the cancers that goes down is stomach cancer, which it's thought is related to water quality, the H. pylori bacteria that can cause ulcers and stomach cancer goes down when you move to the United States.
Isn't
And
also
so,
the prevalence of like using charcoal, things like that too.
right, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
big difference in cooking methods.
And one of the cancers that typically goes up a lot is colon cancer, right? Very quickly when people move to the United States, their colon cancer incidence tends to go up, and maybe we'll get to that.
So
In
their genes didn't change.
right. Well, yeah. Well, clearly their genes aren't changing, but the type of mutation is called a somatic mutation, right? And that's different from a germ mutation. A germ mutation is a mutation that you're going to pass down to your children, right? Germline, your sperm or your ova is mutated and you're going to pass that on to your children. There are types of cancer that have, there's in fact a type of mutation that affects the P53 gene throughout an entire family, and they are all predisposed to getting cancers because their tumor suppressor gene is broken. And they get a variety of different cancers. And then a somatic mutation is a mutation in, say, any given cell, right? Just a random cell in your body that's not going to be passed on like a skin cell or a liver cell in this case. The problem is that cancer cells often have tens of thousands of different mutations, right? So it's not, and some of them have none at all. So there's this big question, okay, the genes have mutated, but what the heck is going on? Well, this is obviously one of the primary candidates. And then we have Seyfried's metabolic hypothesis, right? Which is that cancer is not a genetic disease, it's a metabolic disease, okay? Well, what this paper does is tie those three different threads together because, beg your pardon?
Good point. Carry on. Yeah.
So we have environmental factor, the rapid increase in seed oil consumption. And if you're an immigrant to the United States from a place that consumes less seed oils, your seed oil consumption is going to go up. We see that seed oils can cause genetic mutations here, right? Either orally by this pathway or through the lungs. Seed oils are involved in lung cancer, which is rather surprising. The third is the metabolic pathway. The P53 gene, one of the ways that it prevents tumor growth is by preventing the cells from going into the Warburg method. This is the gene that controls the Warburg method in cells. And when it breaks down, cells are then able to not go into apoptosis, but to go rogue and start producing their own food using the Warburg method.
Could you go into that more about the Warburg process?
So the Warburg method, the Warburg effect, I guess I should call it, is a attribute of cancer cells. You know, one of the ways that they scan you to see if you have cancer is they use something called a PET scan. And what a PET scan does is detect areas of the body that are using high amounts of glucose for fuel. And cancer cells are typically hotspots of using glucose for fuel, right?
Which is why they do the neck down separate, because the brain would light up. Yeah,
right. The brain is always using a lot of glucose unless you're on a ketogenic diet. But the cancer cells specifically tend to use a lot of glucose. And that's known as the Warburg effect. They switch from using mitochondria as the primary fuel source in the cell, which can use fat or glucose, to doing an older kind of energy production called the glycolysis, which takes place outside of the mitochondria, right? And is a very inefficient way of producing energy from glucose, but is very quick. And to the extent that the cells can get a sufficient glucose supply, and there are various mechanisms that they will use to get more glucose or glutamate, which they can use also, which is an amino acid. They will suck up as much glucose as they can, and hence they burn brightly in a PET scan. They show up as a bright spot, right? So the P53 gene is involved, and we should probably go into that on a separate topic, is involved in controlling whether or not cells can go into using the Warburg effect for fuel, and not allowing them to do that basically means that the mitochondrial control pathway in the cell called apoptosis is still in effect. Mitochondria, when they start getting too damaged, have the capability to send out a signal that causes the cell to shut down. And cancer is one of the situations where that, that signal breaking down allows cancer cells with dysfunctional mitochondria to continue to live in the cell and to reproduce and spread throughout the body. So this is, this paper and the implications for what P53 is doing in the body, it really ties together the three understandings of what is causing and driving cancer in our bodies. And I think it's an amazingly neat piece of work.
Yeah, every medical student learns about P53. I mean, that's a hot button topic.
But did they explain that to you, that the P53 controls the Warburg effect?
I was going to say, I don't think every medical student learns about the Warburg effect. When I mention it to when I mention it to doctors who are in my family, they're like, "Nah."
Oh, really?
That's not how it works. Yeah.
I guess they should have gone to Brian's medical school.
Well, so I think it's coming at it from two different angles. When you're just on social media or you're in the nutrition sphere of the internet, the Warburg effect is brought up in the context of glucose is bad. Look, glucose is so bad that your cancer wants to eat it, right? And I don't think that's fair. Of course, that's probably a 1,000-hour discussion. But
no, I think you're right. I mean, they're using glucose, but that doesn't mean that glucose is causing the cancer.
Yeah. For instance, and I'd love to, when we do a thread on ferroptosis sometime, or ferroptosis, depending on if you want to pronounce the P. I've read recently about how, of course, it could be oncogenic, but then it turns into a tumor suppressing mechanism as well. So,
right.
Compound X causes bad thing, but then starts to suppress bad thing. Not everything is just a linear relationship here, and that's one of the concepts that we try to explore, because these topics that we cover, it's not just that you're just sitting in the corner sipping a seed oil and your head explodes, right? There's so many different factors that play at what increases oxidative stress. It's not just your seed oil intake, so there's there's high omega-6 diets that can have factors that would lead to less oxidation, just like how there's high seed oil, high omega-6 diets with factors that would maximize that process. And that's another aspect I think that we should explore further too.
Yeah, absolutely. Omega-6 fats can act almost like a gasoline. They're harmless until somebody strikes the match and they get oxidized and then they start producing all these damaging chemicals.
Yeah, like what's the cascade of ARDS? That's fascinating to look into that. I'd be curious to dive deeper on those threads.
Yep. Matt, any thoughts or questions?
Not directly related to this paper, but I have this lingering question in the back of my mind on some of the Warburg stuff. So now I remember the book I read was called Ravenous. I think that's like the leading Otto Warburg biography. But the book talks about, so he was doing his work in like late 1920s onwards, right? And he survived. He survived the Second World War.
Not only, a fascinating point. Hitler was terrified of cancer. Warburg was Jewish. Hitler made an exception and kept him around.
Yeah. So basically, I was going to get there. Like, Hitler was terrified of cancer, and I remember reading in the book, thinking at the time it was like in the previous decade, cancer incident rates in Germany had gone from maybe 1 in 40 to 1 in 20, or either 1 in 40 to 1 in 20, or 1 in 400 to 1 in 200, and that was terrifying to them at the time. And no one could really understand where it was coming from, which is interesting compared to now it's the second leading cause of death in America.
Right.
It's like how far you've come, and it almost seems like there's no hysteria around it now, I would say. But the book doesn't make it does well to say, hey, there's basically this fermenting of glutamine and glucose function that happens that kind of went forgotten for like 40 years of medicine and biology, but it doesn't really make a conclusion as to what the like leading theories are. So there's definitely the DNA damage, and then there's like an environment where we have a lot more glucose flowing through our food in general, and so those two things like could be argued like lead to this situation where we have rampant cancer, right? Like if you do end up with early cancer cells, you are going to end up feeding them, because I think in the book it says they have 10 times the number of insulin receptors as like a normal muscle cell. So they like steal glucose from your body basically.
Right.
Because
They're
ravenous.
optimized for glucose metabolism. Yeah.
So bringing this back around, anyway, the thought I never really understood in my head was like 1930s Germany. Like, what is the level of, what is the oxidative stress load from plant-based polyunsaturated fats at that time? So that's much, much lower than now, but 1 in 40, 1 in 20, that is, we're talking about a much, much lower incidence rate of cancer. By that point, though, like adulterated food was in the system, right? So, I mean, 30 years into that century.
Hydrogenation of vegetable oils was invented in Germany and was patented in Germany in the late 1800s.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think the British bought the patent. It may have been Unilever, but I may just be blaming them for everything, as I want to. And then a British scientist brought that knowledge to the United States, where he went to work for Procter and Gamble, and he produced Crisco, right? So Gary Taubes covers this really well, just as a peripheral issue in his book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, that prior to World War II, a lot of the leading medical research in the world was done in Germany and unfortunately published in German, right? Yeah. So if you really wanted to be top tier, you had to learn German to read the German medical papers. I took a semester of German in college, and I'm not in a position to go start researching through the German medical literature. So if there's anybody now, what I suspect from knowing how it works over there now, right? The Ukraine is a huge producer of sunflower oil and has been for a long time. And, part of the reason Hitler wanted to, when the Marxists took over, they drove a lot of Germans out of Russia. And one of the reasons that Hitler wanted to invade Russia was to get access to more food supplies, better food supplies. So I'm going to guess that in Germany, it was probably sunflower oil that they were using as a food source. And obviously they were, since they were hydrogenating it and using it as a replacement for animal fats, they were probably consuming a fairly large amount of it by the late 1800s.
So it was basically sunflower oil and methamphetamine.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
You also, you kind of touched this on your last podcast with the guy whose name was now beyond me, but like do I want to call it theoretical? There is a threshold. So it doesn't actually have to mean that
Jacob Hands.
Yeah. So it doesn't actually have to mean that Hitler was eating fries every day, cooked in the same oils or whatever. Like the threshold is quite low to meet that.
Right.
And I think, there's probably another discussion there for another day of how low that threshold is. Cool. Yeah, that was my question. That was a long one.
Yeah, people eating compared to now, moderate or small amount of seed oils while smoking 2 packs a day, and working in factories that are being exposed to things that we just aren't exposed to nowadays, and the environment is not very clean. They were getting cancer, I guess, in their 60s or 70s, or having heart attacks late in life. But now we're in a world where you die at 51, right, from a heart attack, or you get half your colon removed in your 30s, right?
Right.
Like it's a different. The scale is completely different.
Right. Right. And I mean, it's, it's important to note as far as the threshold goes. Most of these diseases that we now know have where seed oils plays a strong causal role. Diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. The big increase in all of them was at the end of the 18th century. I mean, the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Society were all started in the early 1900s. And, diabetes, I don't know when the ADA was started, but, Taubes covers in his book that diabetes was like a super rare disease in the United States prior to the Civil War. And they kept good records of it in Boston, in part because it was so unusual. And then now we're in a country where broadly defined, a majority of people, 51%, have diabetes.
Bonkers.
Yeah. And of course, diabetes and cancer are super closely associated. Having one predisposes you to the other. And of course, diabetes and heart disease are very closely associated. So,
and for those listening, we're just very humbly stating that we have most of this figured out.
Well,
at least what I'm betting my own health on.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is what I'm betting my health on.
I mean,
yeah.
I learned this the hard way. I was very sick, and taking seed oils out helped me resolve everything. I mean, it was just mind-boggling. So when people, tell me, "Oh, you blame everything on seed oils?" Well, yeah, because that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. And
there's a pie chart that's real somewhere in someone's head, and a very large piece of it is what we're talking about. So that's not too crazy of a claim.
Okay. Any final thoughts or questions?
No, great topic. I'm excited to do more. I think this is good timing.
At this point, we go off topic. Great.
Help people
Matt?
understand these things.
I kind of want to come back around to something we discussed at the beginning a little bit, which is just so when I think what am I? Manoa is 26 months old, so I'm like 2 and a bit years into this journey, I'd say. And when people ask me, and this is literally just happened last day, okay, so like, what do you do? Or like, what are you trying to do? Because I think it's very easy for people to get like quite dogmatic about their food regimens, which is fair. I've definitely done it as well. I generally talk about, I want to live a long life. I want to be like hard to kill. I want to pick up my grandkids at their when they exist, fingers crossed. I want to be cancer free, and I want to avoid heart disease. Like those are ultimately somewhere in there, dementia, Alzheimer's. And the way I've kind of settled on that is like, especially in a cancer environment, avoiding unnatural levels of oxidative stress, and then trying to somewhat avoid like a high glucose environment. It's like, if I literally somehow in there mess this up and my P53 gene gets mutated and the cancer cells are starting to grow, like I'm not fueling it with the rest of the food that I eat. Caveat that with, I've almost eaten purely honey for the last 2 weeks, which is a whole nother discussion that we should have another time.
Experimenting.
Experimenting with some stuff. Got my CGM on. And wow. I guess there's a question there of like, I think that's a reasonable approach where like, I definitely am not eating refined sugars. I'm trying to eat more natural sugars, but like
honey is a refined sugar. Don't kid yourself.
Well, yeah. It definitely doesn't make me behave the way that like white sugar makes me behave, I'd say. Do you have a sense of like which one of those levers? Well, yeah, of course you have a sense of one of those levers. Do you have a sense of the proportion between those levers, which would be more productive for health, right? Like removing seed oils and like lowering the amount of refined sugar that someone has in their diet. It's not 50-50,
No.
One is kind of causal and the other one's more of like reactive in many ways.
Um, I don't think sugar's all that important in the context of a otherwise healthy diet, which I think, there are papers out there that look at fructose, which is, table sugar is sucrose. It's a glucose and a fructose bound together 50-50. There are papers out there looking at fructose and fatty liver disease, and they measure the damage that's being caused by the increase in HNE in the body. Wait a minute, what? So,
And do they mention linoleic?
yeah, no, usually not.
Usually not. No.
So fructose and alcohol both seem to have the effect of increasing the oxidation of the oxidative damage to polyunsaturated fats. So if and I mean with alcohol, this is super clear because we have alcoholic liver disease. And if you replace polyunsaturated fats with saturated fats, in the animal models, they can feed rats up to like 30% of their diet is ethanol and they're fine. Don't try this at home, folks. Right? So and I mean, again, I found a paper the other day and they're measuring the harm from ethanol on the liver of rats by the production of HNE. Okay, so that said, sugar rots your face, right? It's a clear independent cause of tooth decay.
Yeah.
I went on a low sugar diet when I was like 18 or 19 because my dentist told me that if I didn't want to keep coming back to him to get cavities drilled out, I could just stop eating sugar. So I did, and he was right. And it was great. I was so happy not to see a dentist for 20 years. Literally, I didn't go see a dentist for 20 years. And then, my now ex-wife made me go see a dentist, and I was a little alarmed at what he was going to find. And what he found was no cavities. So that's pretty cool. But does sugar cause, there are populations like the Hadza or, other African tribes who eat colossal amounts of honey and they don't have diabetes, they don't have heart disease, they don't have cancer like we do, but they do have tooth decay, right?
That's a fair point.
So, yeah, I think it's still a good idea to avoid refined sugar. When I fixed my diet, one of the most surprising things I learned was that I could probably eat more sugar than I had been for the prior couple of decades. And I do. And you know what? It's nice to have ice cream or, put some maple syrup in my full fat yogurt when I have it.
I mean, I would
Have no
say,
cavities. I'm
yeah,
keeping it low enough. And when people ask me how much sugar is too much, if you're getting cavities, that's too much.
yeah. I think I definitely had a experience 2 weeks ago is when I started this. So where having been effectively pretty aggressively some version of keto, carnivore, paleo for a long time, 8 years, let's say.
Yep.
I was like, I'm gonna get fat, but like 2 weeks, let's do it, let's see what happens. And was surprised that that is like not how that works. Like,
Sorry, explain that.
sorry. So I basically thought if I looked at a carbohydrate, I was just going to immediately become obese. And all of my kind of experiences when I have eaten that stuff and swayed have come with inflammation and some weight gain. And then under, I would say under like tacit supervision of a PhD macrobiologist, I'm like trying this experiment where I eat during the day, like almost just honey, maple syrup, and see what we can do. I am brushing my teeth several times a day.
Okay.
But I'm not, I haven't gained any weight. And I think part of that for me is that over the 2 years over the 2-year journey, I've like detoxified, or I've done some reduction of like linoleic acid in my body, and definitely in my diet, right? Like if you put those two things together, probably like a high carbohydrate diet and then like high linoleic acid foods, you're gonna get yourself in a pretty bad position. But having removed one of them, it's been like very peaceful eating a pound of honey every day, thinking that it would literally turn me into like a huge morbidly obese person almost instantly. It's been very, very interesting to be like, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't the sugar that was the issue when I went keto. Maybe it was the soybean oil and the salad dressings and in the dip that comes with the pizza and in the fake cheese
Right.
and like in all of the other stuff that you're eating at that point in time.
Dirty keto, as
Yeah.
Josh Durham calls it. Yeah, I mean, there's a obesity researcher called Serwit, and he came up with a couple of different diets to study obesity, and one of his control diets was almost pure sucrose, right? So if you feed animals a ton of sugar, almost a pure sugar diet, they don't get fat. And that's, and I mean, there's definitely a sweet spot in the middle. And I don't entirely understand what's causing that, where, the blend of linoleic acid and other fats and glucose and sucrose seems to be the most fattening combination. And then when you go off kind of in either direction with either towards the all carbohydrate level or the all fat level, it becomes less fattening. And that in that area, the what's called the carbohydrate insulin model seems to be what's driving it, right? You've got a lot of fat around and high levels of insulin, and that affects that what I started calling the fat curve as I'm trying to figure this out. It seems to go away when you lower the seed oil consumption, right? So seed oil drives hyperinsulinemia. Maybe that's what's doing it in that fat curve where you're getting calories on both sides and you're stimulating the endocannabinoid system to make you eat more. It seems to go away though when if you go on a really high seed oil diet, that fat curve, that obesity curve kind of levels off. Your liver fails, but you can't have everything.
Yeah, your genes mutate, but
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, went down a rabbit hole there, but yeah, appreciate your insight.
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry. There were, like the Japanese ate 84% of their calories from carbohydrates right after the Second World War. And when they started adopting the American diet, they started getting what they call the Western cancers. They started having a cancer profile that looked more like America. And part of that change in their diet was we convinced them to stop eating any fats other than seed oils. And, their weight started going up, and their cancer's death rate started going up. But their carbohydrate consumption went down and their sucrose consumption stayed pretty flat. So I'm not concerned about that. I think there are good reasons to eat a low carbohydrate diet, but I just feel better on it and I like my teeth. But
I definitely feel much better on it, and I can't wait to go back.
So really, you're noticing just a negative effect on how
well, not negative, but like when I tried to stop eating honey around 2, and then waiting eating till dinner, and by dinner time I'm like absolutely starving, and in a much lower carbohydrate environment I could just like not eat for 3 days. And when I'm hungry I get like grumpy and irritable and all of the other things that come with it, and it kind of coincides with the time I pick up my son from daycare, and it's just a level of like intensity and like nervous system exhaustion that I don't really need. I think if I literally just ate sugar I'd probably be okay, but well, then I would probably end up with like early sarcopenia. But yeah, it's been an interesting experiment, and understand it's been a small foray into like the world of repeat and understanding some of that stuff, which isn't really my ballpark. But funny anecdote, I was just thinking about this earlier about seed oil avoidance. which I think I do a pretty good job of. We're pretty militant in my house, and if people come into the house, when they look for stuff, we're like, we don't have that. Like this is why we don't have Cheez-Its, because it's terrible. We don't have cooking oil. We don't have these things. We did a potluck like 3 weeks ago with a number of neighborhood families, and you think home cooked food, potluck, going to be pretty clean for the most part. I don't express my understanding of this topic to other people voluntarily, because it's just like, unless someone's interested in it, I'm just not going to get into an argument about it.
Yeah, smart.
Anyway,
that's what I do.
I was sitting at the charcuterie board eating this. I'm trying to think the brand name. It's like begins with a B. It's like a French cheese. French cheese.
Oh, Boursin.
Boursin. I'm like smashing this cheese. Like I honestly tablespoons and tablespoons of it. And then we had dinner and we sat down and we were talking. And one of my neighbors' wives said, "Yeah, I'm lactose intolerant." And I said, "Well, you guys brought the charcuterie board, like with cheese on it. How does that work? The soft cheese doesn't affect you?" She said, "Oh, actually, it's amazing. We found this vegan Boursin, and like you couldn't even tell, could you?" And I was sitting there, and my jaw like got pretty clenched. And my wife like grabs my knee under the table, like, "Don't say anything." And as soon as they left, I'm like Googling it, like, yeah, called rapeseed oil. As I'd probably eaten like 6 grams of linoleic acid in that small period of time. And I was kind of pissed about it, but like, they don't know, and she's married to a national level athlete who was there. He plays for a national like branded team, but their level of nutrition's very, very different than understanding nutrition is very, very different than obviously ours. And I just was like, I go to lengths to avoid these foods, and somehow I probably ate quarter of a pound of that stuff. Like ludicrous. Ludicrous.
Well, we need to do a blinded Matt Boursin test where we get you the vegan variety and the dairy fat variety and see which one you eat more of.
I'm sure I could tell the real one, but I just haven't eaten it probably since I was in England, which is like 5 years ago, right? So it's like, gosh, it was frustrating, very frustrating.
I wouldn't sweat it. I mean, it's annoying, but it happens.
Yeah. Funny.
Yeah.
Cool.
I do. I mean, that's, when people do stuff like that, I typically find some polite way to read the label and check what the ingredients are.
We're doing another potluck this weekend, and one of the dads was like, "Oh, I'll just buy a cake. Like we should do dessert life hack. I'm just gonna buy a cake." And I took a screenshot and sent it to my wife, and we were like, "No, I can't eat a piece of cake. Like we need to have a separate plan.
Yeah,
we'll get our own fake cake, like our own little cake baby was up there." But like, it couldn't be
just like in the comedy movies and sitcoms, you don't want to be like encountering this right in the middle of it, and it's all awkward. The earlier you bring it up, the better. Like, hey, we're weird food people. Haha, no vegetable oil. Like people usually go, okay, right? But that's not even, it's inconvenient, right? But I don't think it's too crazy to folks. First of all, it's going to be the first time most people have heard about that. And thank God it's becoming more common. But if you get caught in the potluck, now that's tough, because then if you bring it up that they brought the poison to you, or what you look at as something. For us, it's easy because we have the special needs daughter, so we're just like, oh, we don't want our daughter to eat this, and then everyone's like, oh, of course, that's no problem. And then we eat that way too. Like we said, we've got this like social pass, so we could use it any time and just get sympathy. But,
I mean, I went to a party once, and some guy, it was right when gluten-free was taking off. And some guy was like, he's like, "You're gluten-free," and he made some comment, about what bullshit that was. And I said, "I've been hospitalized for it repeatedly."
Yeah.
And he was like,
one of the real ones. Yeah.
He was like, "Really?" He was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And so most people, when I explain that, they're very accommodating. They really do try their best.
Yeah. We love joking about the abstract, but when you see an actual human being standing in front of you saying, "Oh, this stuff makes me sick, I don't eat it," people are like, "Oh, okay." And it could be you could say it's lettuce, and people go, "Oh, okay, I guess you don't eat lettuce,"
Yeah.
Like, so.
I now think about it at that dinner. There was another family member who is extremely private, and I was just talking about my health and things I'm investigating and trying to optimize. And she was like, "Yeah, my stomach is a mess. Like the doctor wants to put me on this. I think she does. She has undiagnosed like ulcerative colitis. The doctor wants to put me on this immunosuppressant." And I said, "Well, what have you tried with your food?" So what do you mean? It's like, you're talking about your stomach. Yeah, like the main thing that food goes through. I was like, I'd give me a number. I'll just text you a bunch of like random ideas and like take a week, just like try different food and see what happens. Like a week's a bit short for an experiment, but I think you'd be surprised what you find. And
took me 2 days.
Yeah, she's doing really well. Like the first thing I said was just literally just like eat things that you think you could kind of pick or like kill yourself, but like basically, and I think that was a pretty massive change.
That's great.
As soon as if you're a busy parent, as soon as you stop eating stuff that comes from like looks reasonable but comes from a plastic bag out the freezer, it's like that you make a pretty big difference there, cutting out the odd soybean mix lubricant or whatever. And yeah, she's getting there. We've gone off on a wild tangent. Really sorry.
Yeah, no, one little more anecdote. I went to a business meeting, kind of an industry tech thing, and it was a pizza and beer event.
Gluten fest.
Huh?
Gluten fest.
Yeah. So, I'm like, they're handing me beers, and I'm like, no, I can't. And they're like, the pizza's over there. I'm like, yeah, sorry, I can't do that either. And so one of the guys asked me why, and I was explaining it to him, and to my left, I heard this thud, and this guy to the left of me had, I threw out there as like the funny little zinger anecdote that gluten's a known cause of schizophrenia, and people who have been put on a gluten-free diet have recovered from schizophrenia. And that's when I heard the thump, and the guy to the left of me dropped his beer and turned pale. And it turned out that his mother had been schizophrenic for his whole life. And he had just found that she'd recovered because they'd put her on a gluten-free diet, but he'd never heard of it outside of that context. And he couldn't believe that, oh my God, this is a real thing.
Wow.
So he thought that was some strange phenomenon in his family, and then you just said it out loud. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. He hadn't really connected the dots.
Yeah.
He knew that her schizophrenia had, resolved, that she was acting normally, and he had heard that she had been put on a gluten-free diet. So yeah, I mean,
impactful.
Telling those, I agree with you. You don't want to be the guy who's following everybody around, buttonholing them, but done respectfully and strategically, you can make a big difference for people just by explaining why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, the whole idea for Cetal Disrespecter was a funny icebreaker to even bring up a diet topic with memes. Haha, like, hey, do you want to pick up some Chipotle? No, I don't want to pick up Chipotle. Whoop, drop a funny meme, like,
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, haha, yeah, it's like you can laugh about it.
I have a family member who was pretty good, like being interested, and kept coming back with more questions. And I was like, I'm not an expert, but like I know some, and like here's a bit more science, and here's a bit more science. And it was very much of like, here's the facts that I've seen. Somewhere in there, like I've taken this I've agreed with this conclusion, but like you clearly see it differently, or you might see it differently. And I'm not going to be I'm like not going to be a pariah. I'm not going to attack you for that. You just see it differently. I have a immediate family member who basically did that, and when the conclusion was this is going to be too hard, right? Like I'm poor. I'm like I'm poorish, and I like don't have time to cook food. And they love Cheez-Its, and they like love all this processed food, and they're kind of young enough that they're okay, and like okay, we'll see. But like when you get migraines or pain or your stomach's a mess or you can't sleep or like any of these other things, like give me a call. They have asthma, ADHD. Like there's so many pieces here which are like linked. I won't say they're causal, but they're very linked. Like if any of these things get worse, give me a call. No judgment. Happy to talk you through it. Like pretty sure there's something there. And it's kind of it's a weird one. It's bittersweet because they'll say, oh yeah, I was so tired last night. I just ate McDonald's. It's like, why did you tell me that? That does upset me. Why, I know you should. You've seen the science that says the outer high load
Well,
of eating fries is insane. Like, don't do that.
yeah, yeah. Well, sometimes there's nothing you can do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
Great
yeah,
riffing.
but lots, I mean, I'm, here with my wife who I had one of those dinners with her just because I want to end this on an upbeat note. And I went through the usual negotiation with the waitress and she looks at me and she goes, you look great. What do you eat? Because she was a near vegan at the time and was pretty overweight. And I didn't want to get into it with her, but she was a friend of mine. So I just, explained to, we went to high school together. And I just explained literally in a sentence or two what I do and left it at that. Right. And then we talked, we were with another friend from high school. So we talked about stuff that such people talk about. And 2 weeks later, I get this text from her, I'm down 17 pounds. And, and I find out later that she's had fibromyalgia since she was in her 20s and it's in complete remission, total remission from diet. And she's off all the drugs that she was on, everything, stopped everything. And she, hypertension is down, her genetic high blood pressure has gone away. I mean, it's amazing. So
And
yeah, even just a little comment can
but
make a big difference if the person's in the right place to hear it.
fibromyalgia is also one with like a nebulous medical definition and almost like no cure. So that's like that's fantastic. That's
Well,
amazing.
she's not the first person with fibromyalgia I've cured
Yeah,
either.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
I think what I'm going to start doing with some of these is just what I did with the Jacob Hands one, just put a segment in it so if people want to bail after the study thing and not listen to us chit chat, they can do that too.
This is our good riffing, though.
It's good riffing. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, all right, guys. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
There we go. So,
Good talking, guys.
I didn't bring up your Omega Quant test because I was curious. Jacob works with Rhonda Patrick and Bill Harris now.
Oh, funny.
And he and I were talking about ALDH today, and I want to ask him to ask Bill Harris if he knows of if there's any research or if he has any thoughts on the intersection of an ALDH 2-star-2 mutation and the Omega Quant test, right? If they've tested it against people who have that and see if there's something going on there.
That would be interesting. So I'm sure I'm trying to think if you've ever, I don't even know the guy's name, the experimental fat loss guy.
I don't know his name. Yeah.
Yeah, he just drinks like heavy cream basically and restricts protein. So he insisted I do it. We were talking about something like a month ago, and he was like, "Do it." And I looked at it. It was like $100. Cool, done. Like ordered it, whatever. Did the blood test. Sitting on my high horse, got the result, and looked at it with him and was like, "What? Like 20% linoleic acid is not what it should be for somebody that's been like aggressively removing this thing from their diet for 2 years," is my understanding. He was saying, yeah, like 10% is the baseline I see if you're super healthy, right? That's what happens. Because he has a data set of people that do these tests. He's like, if you're morbidly obese and you're coming off of a SAD diet, you're at like 33. But 20 he was like, you're one of the highest people in the database, which was surprising to me. And we've been trying to break it down. And I was like, I literally can go through all of my shopping history for the last year. And we've done this. And like, The only two things that I would say I've like eaten substantial amounts of in periods, because he said it was a 3-month average, he reckons, is there was a 2-week period in January where I ate a ton of pork rinds. And I showed him the nutrition label and was like, the nutrition label suggests that there's basically no polyunsaturated fats in this product, which we kind of know is nonsense, but I took a bet on the nutrition label. Otherwise, I was like, I ate a lot of chicken breast, but like skinless chicken breast, which I've basically decided I'd never want to eat that again for the most part. But it like doesn't, anyway, the results don't make sense to me. So,
well, chicken breast is going to be, even if it's skinless, it's what Holbert called the invisible fat, right? All the fat in the cell membranes is going to be high in omega-6.
I guess
what about eggs?
The volume. I had gone through phases of eating a lot, but I buy pasture-raised eggs.
What, Vital Farms?
Yeah, or the Sam's Club ones, the Sam's Club pasture-raised eggs.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I buy just because I can't get anything better, but one of the things I would love to do at some point is test those and see how good they actually are.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to make me go do this stupid test myself, and I hate these stupid tests.
This is the reason why I haven't done it yet.
When I saw the numbers, I was like, that's fine. And then when I sent them to him and he was like, what is going on? I like lost sleep over it. It gave me anxiety, which I think is how I kind of phrased it in the email, where I was like, I mean, the interesting thing is, I have all these incomplete pieces in my knowledge here. In a Ray Peak understanding context, there's a piece to me which is like, I have been losing body fat since 2020, and so there's an argument to be said that some part of this is releasing these free fatty acids, like releasing this lipid profile into my bloodstream from my adipose tissue. But I haven't done any significant weight loss since November, so wouldn't really be going on then. And the only thing I was eating was chicken, although you're right, like the primary fat in chicken is polyunsaturated. Well, it's like 30% linoleic acid, I think is where I've kind of come to, 20%. I don't know. I can't make sense of it. But there's a piece which is like, when I the only way I will lose body fat is if I do an extreme caloric restriction. And there's a piece there around something funny with my metabolism, and I'm wondering if there's some role of the PUFA stored in my adipose tissue, which plays a role.
Yeah, I mean, but you're not. It is. You're not fat enough, dude.
Yeah. I was thinking, how lean are you?
I'm probably 16-17% body fat.
But how much? What's your body weight?
163.
163, and you're how tall?
5'11".
Okay. Yeah, I find it unlikely that's.
So it doesn't like this. There's something not adding up. I would say I eat there is this. I eat, for the past couple of months, I've probably eaten half a pound of what I understood to be wild caught Alaskan salmon every week. But that's not that much.
Well, and wild caught salmon is low in linoleic acid, so that's not going to be
exactly.
It.
I mean, he was suggesting that there's some smells of fraud, but
yeah,
actually,
no, I've said that, and that's definitely the case. Have you ever gone to the supermarket and looked at the wild caught next to the farm raised?
Yeah. So it's a deep. I mean, I pick it up and it's a deep red, as opposed
and it doesn't have the intramuscular fat.
No, it looks pretty pure. Yeah, it looks pretty pure.
Then it's probably the real stuff. And I mean,
so I have no idea.
Yeah, and even then, farm raised salmon is lower in linoleic acid than chicken is. So
I do. Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah,
interesting.
I have no conclusion on that one. But
so Brian, should we go in on this and do our omega quants just to see what it looks like?
How much does it cost?
It's like, I think it's like $100 on Amazon.
Yeah.
They send it to you. I might actually do another one. I mean, the
No.
only other thing I would say is like I misread the instructions on getting the blood out, and I think I like the first drop you're supposed to throw away, and I put the first drop on the samples. I don't know if that how much that would affect the actual sample of blood. Um,
Why, can you think, Brian, why you would need to throw the first drop away? It could be contaminated by skin. I don't know.
I mean, if it's that sensitive, yeah, you'd want more something free flowing. I don't know if maybe the first drop would be contaminated with, yeah, something.
Skin fats.
I don't know with what, but in general, I mean, shit, when I get water out of a thing at a restaurant, I run it for a second and then I do it. You know what I mean? Like, no,
I do,
seriously.
yeah. I wonder if
I
I
can't
mean,
give you an answer, but
my
I
mind was
guarantee you
like,
there's probably something.
is it that like the fat composition lining your capillaries will like get sucked out in the first drop, and therefore you want the free flowing stuff?
And you could
Maybe
have you could have more hemolysis or something too. Maybe that would affect it. I don't know.
I'm going to do another one. I'm happy to discuss all of my stats, numbers, blood tests, hormones,
Yeah.
anything on a recorded podcast. I've been on an interesting dive this year anyway, just trying to figure out what's going on, but not been too not been too encouraged by the medical system. Seen endocrinologists and primary care provider, and like no, everybody just like you're fine. And I basically have just been exhausted. And I've realized I've been exhausted for like 10 years. And I
Okay.
know I have a baby and
Do
some
you
other stuff.
exercise?
I do an enormous amount of exercise, which is some part of it. But the interesting, just like the way I ended up rolling into the Ray Peat thing is because my thyroid panel, my primary care provider was like, your TSH is fine. I don't want to do any more of this. And I happened to get some other thyroid numbers in another blood test I did. And my T4 is healthy, but my T3 is like hyper low. So I've not been converting T4 into T3 appropriately, I think is my like conclusion. Anyway, there's a much longer discussion here. I started taking NDT and I feel phenomenal. Like it's literally, I've tried several things and that's the thing that's turned around
You
for me.
tried what?
Natural desiccated thyroid.
Okay,
Like
armor
natural desiccated.
or
The actual, I have raw natural desiccated thyroid from, it's made in Boulder, I guess, but it's from,
okay. Armor was an old brand that was popular because it was made from like pig thyroids or something
that's what
like
they
that.
all, yeah, that's what they all have. Yeah, that is what they all talk about. And I literally, I've tried several things, and I was like, I don't want to touch. This feels very dangerous. I don't want to touch this. I don't want to touch this. And I took a pill, and it was like someone turned the lights on, and I was like, oh my god, like I have access to like the energy that I eat, which has been very peculiar for me.
And you're
For
doing
sure.
this at the same time you're taking all the glucose,
Yes.
all the sucrose?
Yes. They probably did. They start. They didn't. Once the sugar, I started the sugar. I've only been taking the thyroid for a week. I started the sugar 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
But
Have you read my blog post on what thyroid hormones do in your body?
no,
Okay. You might.
I should read that one.
Yeah. It took me, honest to God, it was the most ridiculous thing. It took me so long to find a scientific explanation of what thyroid hormones do to your body. It was very surprising. So yeah, I'm not surprised if you're on a high sugar diet and you're taking thyroid hormones that you feel really good.
We'll see. I'll just pull it up. I'll give it a read.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
You're such a fun guinea pig, Matt. Thank you so much.
It's definitely, I would say, like, so I don't know if you've come across this guy. His Twitter handle is Anabology, I think.
Yep.
And yeah. So when he started this honey thing, he did this honey thing last year, and I watched it from the sidelines, being like, that is freaking insane. As somebody who was eating pound and a half of beef every day and was terrified of eating any carbohydrates, I really thought this is mental, and it's just been a very healthy personal experience to be like, you know what, like if I'm really going to try and experiment to an outcome, I have to remove some of the controls. Like sugar shouldn't scare me actually, and Yeah, I think that that's just been it's been an interesting discovery. The thing about eating this much sugar to me is I'm very aware that if I eat anything else with the sugar, I'm going to get myself in trouble. Through my very bad understanding of the Randall
Well,
cycle.
oh,
Um,
no, 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 no. Yes,
no,
bad understanding. Your body is designed to run on multiple fuels simultaneously, and it does so all the time. It's not going to make a difference with the Randall cycle. Um,
but I seemingly have been able to eat an amount of calories in the last 2 weeks that I couldn't do in the weeks before that. And that's somewhat by doing like by timing the different macronutrients, I think. So I don't know. That's the argument that this to be had. But
and what benefit are you hoping to get out of this experiment?
yeah, my hope was to lean up a little bit more before cycling season starts without being starving. It was like, can I do those two things at once, basically? Can I? Because before I got to the point of being like, if any noticeable difference of fat loss would have to come if I was eating about 1,000 calories of food a day, which is almost at that point pure protein, to stop lean muscle mass loss, and is miserable. I don't think anybody should do that. It's so awful. Uh,
Have you ever heard of Vinnie Tortorich?
um, did he make movies? Did he make that fat movie?
He did make a movie. Yes, he did, actually. I haven't even seen that yet. Um, yeah, you should read up a little bit on him because he was a trainer in Hollywood for like movie stars and stuff, and also an endurance cyclist. Um, and a keto diet adherent for a long time. That was, if I'd be curious to hear what he thinks about this, if he could get a word out in between the laughs.
Yeah, yeah. I'll
Because
take a look.
yeah, yeah, that'd be interesting. He's on Twitter. You should ask him what he thinks of a high sugar diet for cycling performance. I'd be interested to hear what he
No
says.
sugar, no grains. I definitely. I mean, I would say, yeah. I also used to. Before 2 weeks ago. I guess I haven't done this since then. I could ride 3, 4 hours completely fasted, and I'd be like, fine. I
Right.
mean, I don't think I've ever bonked in my life, and that's definitely different doing training and eating this much sugar. Where like, yeah, I have to take breaks and eat because my blood sugar drops extremely low, and yeah, it doesn't work out that way. But it's an interesting set of experiments that I'm laughing my way through. Especially I mean, I would have, and my understanding is now I would have failed a glucose tolerance test coming straight from keto. And
Which is normal.
my CGM numbers were last Monday, Tuesday were mind blowing. I got the first day I did it, my blood sugar spiked to 200 milligrams per
Oh
deciliter.
dear.
Like literally went off the screen of my Abbott CGM, and I could feel it. My whole body was like shaking basically as it then came straight back down, which was, I mean, that was the silver lining, is like my spikes are very healthy, right? I don't have like very high prolonged
And that's
sugar
normalized as
crashes.
you've continued
Yeah,
taking
yeah,
sugar.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
okay. That's normal.
but that's been really fascinating to watch. But yeah. Anyway, it's bizarre. It's been a bizarre foray into something new. Uh,
All
but
right,
yeah, yeah.
cool. Brian's about to fall asleep. Either that or he's doing his meme composition back there.
I did. I literally made one and posted it.
Nice.
Excellent.
I do it like almost every day. Sometimes I'm like, shit, I didn't do one yesterday. But yeah, yeah. Sometimes it comes naturally while I'm just perusing. Other times I have to force it. Usually it doesn't
Right.
take too long.
Oh, I want to ask you, what do you think of poor Zach? His it might take 105 years to detox.
Uh, you know,
You saw my retweet of that.
so I noticed that particular thing, it really rubs them wrong because they look at this as like nutritional tribalism, so they want to diminish and kind of dismiss us. So this is like partly a bargaining phase, partly, first they laugh at you, then they whatever,
Yeah.
So they love joking about this, but I love how we can take something like that and go, well, you're right when it comes to the lenses. Like we literally could just use his dismissal and be like, well, this is where you're actually correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, because it was funny because I posted a thing about 8 years and people came out of the woodwork with a post I made about 5 years before, like, oh, you're full of shit. You said 5 years last year, now it's 8 years. It's like, time is not a flat circle. Time moves forward,
It does make me wonder if you loop back around to my omega quant of like 2 years is not even one half-life. So there could be something there. I mean, I was 25 pounds heavy. Sorry. No, I was 25 pounds heavier at the end of 2020, pretty much.
Oh shit. Damn. Okay.
25, close to 20.
Were you bulking or just
No, just like when I moved from California to Colorado, like blew my knee out cycling.
Okay.
That's an excuse. We just started eating. We just ate a bit more without realizing it. It wasn't like eating a lot. But I will say that was my first year in America. We discovered our favorite, this really makes me cringe. We discovered our favorite tortilla chip was like Safeway homemade tortilla chip, which is like, I think it's soybean and safflower. I picked up a bag.
My God. Safflower oil is basically just fucking rocket fuel.
I was in Sacramento last Monday for work.
80% PUFA or something insane. I don't know.
I was in Sacramento
exactly.
for work.
You might as well just buy chemical grade HNE and shoot it into your veins.
And like we thought we were eating pretty healthy, but like just a couple of those on the side. But we were going once you start, you don't stop, right? We're going through like quite a few bags, and then we were eating frozen pizzas and mostly healthy food, but like let's say 50-50. Not a lot of takeout, not a lot of fast food, but still gained a ton of weight, and I've kind of been trying to definitely keep my thumb back on the scale since then. So I mean that is my times in America have been the most seed oil laden diets for sure, those years. And 2020 to 2023, that's only end of 2020, that's only 2 years. That's only a 2-year ish detox period. No, that's not right. No, it's 2. That's 3 years. So if it's a half-life of 5 or 8, like I would still be in the early days. Like my adipose tissue would be pretty strongly poofered. Who knows?
It's
possible. I mean, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Well, I love looking back on the intensity of the pain of my migraines and how when because I used to I used to eat fast food all the time. And then I just matured a bit in my 20s when I learned about paleo and wasn't eating as much. And God, the intensity just went away. Like the pain, I still have migraines now, but it's just nothing like it used to be. And it was before I really knew it's the seed oils. But looking back, the timeline lines up perfectly. I mean, it used to be debilitating pain from migraines. And then when I quit, and I don't think it was the carbs because I still eat sugar, right? But it was, it went from, more casual, going to get a number 6 at Wendy's, and Chipotle more often, to more like, every once in a while we're at a restaurant, maybe every weekend, and I'll get a burger and fries. That was more, and the random, but still the number went down. And but so what was when I went full disrespect, what was my level, right? It wasn't like a lot of people's, but it's still a level, and it's going to take that long to get down to a low level, right? So that's just the way it works.
The other thing I realize is the levels are percentages and not absolute numbers. So whilst I'm relatively lean now, like the percentage could still be a legit number. The absolute level is going to be way lower than somebody else who's carrying an extra 15 pounds potentially. But
no. Those are just looking at proportions of fats in your red blood cells. So it's not looking at adipose content or anything else.
It's just that makes sense. That makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's literally fats in flux through your system. And it's 3 months, as X fat loss was saying, because that's about the life of a red blood cell.
You know that one trainer, what's his name? Jerry. The last name is like Teix.
JT Teixeira.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So he's really sympathetic to our idea. He doesn't just talk about Cedal's idea every day, but he buys in. And he was messaging me about how he cleaned up his diet. And he says towards the beginning he could kind of gain weight back more easily, but he noticed even though he didn't change much, he said like 6, 7, 8 years later, 5 years later, it became so much harder to gain weight. Because he's like, look, I eat a little bit of Cedals here and there. I don't go all out. He's like, because you could look at him. He's a guy who takes his diet seriously, but he talked about how it's just difficult for him to gain fat now, right? Compared to when he first started.
Interesting. So there's a physician on Twitter, and I don't know if he's talked about this online, so I'm not going to say who he is, but he only cut back on omega-6. He's in his 60s, I think, and was able to get into the green on the omega quant test, but I don't know over what period of time. So he didn't do any omega-3 supplementation.
Yeah.
We've tried to wrap this several times. I have a hard stop. I'm a minute late to another
Okay,
meeting.
thank God.
Hey man, take care.
See you later, guys.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
All right, God
bye.
bless. Take care. See you.